In this video, we will focus on the 2nd, 4th, and 5th sessions of the Council of Chalcedon. These were the sessions where the matters of faith were discussed and the Chalcedonian Creed was decided upon. Let's dive in. At the start of the 2nd session, the Roman legate's main goal was to get the Tome of Leo approved as an article of faith. The session began with a short recap of the events of the first session. The Senate then explained that it was now time to focus on matters of the faith, and it encouraged the bishops to begin composing a statement of faith concerning the nature of Christ. The bishops objected to this, explaining that the faith of the Church was explained by the Fathers at Nicaea, and that a new creed would be unnecessary. They further explained that such a creed would be uncanonical, since the First Council of Ephesus forbade the writing of any new creeds. The Senate disregarded the bishops' opinions and ordered that a small group of bishops leave the main assembly to begin working on the Chalcedonian Creed. Meanwhile, the Articles of the Faith were read by the council. This included the usual items: the Nicene Creed, St. Cyril of Alexandria's second letter to Nestorius, and the Formulary of Reunion. A new addition was made, however: the Tome of Leo. The tome was met with great approval from many of the Eastern bishops, and the Roman legates thought that their goal had been achieved. However, it failed to be recognized as an article of faith. 3 specific passages were questioned, and one bishop requested more time for it to be compared to the teachings of St. Cyril. The Romans had failed to achieve their goal. The cheers of approval from the Eastern bishops towards Pope Leo and his tome then shifted to calls for the exile of Pope Dioscoros and the Egyptian bishops. The Illyrian bishops then submitted a petition for the restoration of Pope Dioscoros. In response to this, some of the clerics from Constantinople condemned them for keeping communion with Pope Dioscoros after he was deposed. Seeing how the council was devolving towards a discussion of Pope Dioscoros and his faith, the Senate concluded the session abruptly, announcing that the council would not meet for 5 days. The 4th session took place on the 17th of October and was attended by 305 bishops. The Senate began by asking the bishops if they thought that the Tome of Leo was in line with the faith of the Nicene Creed. The bishops took turns declaring their agreement. Of the 305, 161 declared their support and signed the Tome of Leo. The Senate then repeated the question and asked the bishops who had not agreed to reconsider and vote as one body. The bishops replied by shouts of approval, and the motion was carried unanimously. The Roman legates then submitted a petition for the restoration of the 5 bishops who had been deposed with Pope Dioscoros at the first session. These bishops had signed the Tome of Leo at a certain point between the 1st and 4th sessions and were now back in Rome's good graces. The commissioners accepted the petition and explained that they will have it delivered to the emperor. However, the commissioners made some remarks in the response that were understood by the council as a display of their disapproval for the proceedings at the second trial of Pope Dioscoros. This resulted in a great uproar of shouts from the Eastern bishops in defense of their deposition of Pope Dioscoros. Within a few hours, the emperor had accepted the Roman petition, and the 5 bishops were readmitted as judges at the Council of Chalcedon. The council then turned its attention to the Egyptian bishops. There had been 20 in attendance at the first session, but at this point there were only 13. These bishops were only a small number of representatives, with many more bishops having stayed in their dioceses in Egypt. None of the Egyptian bishops had attended the 2nd and 3rd sessions, since their archbishop, Pope Dioscoros, was not present. Now they were placed between a rock and a hard place. They knew that Chalcedon would not be accepted by the Egyptian Church because of how Pope Dioscoros was treated, but they also couldn't antagonize the council, otherwise the Church would schism. They decided that they would submit a petition declaring their faith to the council. In their petition, they used biblical language and avoided any terminology associated with either side of the dispute. The council, however, protested against the petition since it did not include any obvious condemnation of Eutychus and since it did not confirm their full agreement with the Tome of Leo. The Egyptian bishops responded by explaining that they had given account of their Catholic and Orthodox faith. However, they are unable to anathematize nor endorse anyone, since, by the canons of the Church as established at Nicaea, they are suffragan bishops and must follow the opinion of their archbishop, who is not present. The council still did not like the reply and pushed them to condemn Eutychus and sign the Tome of Leo. But the bishops once again refused, explaining that they are just a few of the bishops of Egypt and that they cannot make a decision for the whole of the Egyptian Church without the presence of the archbishop. One of the bishops, named Bishop Cecropius of Sebastopolis, mocked them. He told them that this council was greater than Egypt and its bishops, and that they should express their personal opinion. Bishop Eusebius of Dorylaeum added that they were in fact sent as representatives with Pope Dioscoros, and so they had the ability to represent the Egyptian Church. Seeing no other option, the Egyptian bishops broke down. They begged and prayed. explaining it would be better for them to be executed here in Chalcedon or to be deposed from their sees than to be pressured into making a decision without their archbishop. They told the council that if they wanted a decision made, then they should appoint a new archbishop for Alexandria, and that they would be willing to vote with him. The imperial commissioners agreed with the Egyptian bishops. They noted that the bishops abstained from voting not because of a disagreement of faith, but because the canons prevented them from doing so without an archbishop. The bishops wouldn't get off easy, though. The commissioners ordered that the bishops should remain in Constantinople until a new archbishop is appointed for Alexandria. Once that is done, they are to sign the Tome of Leo. Finished with the Egyptian bishops for now, the council turned to those monks who had supported Eutychus. The monks demanded that St. Dioscorus be restored. When they refused to accept the Tome of Leo or condemn Eutychus, they were handed over to the jurisdiction of Patriarch Anatolius of Constantinople to deal with them as he deemed fit. To summarize, in this one session the Roman legate succeeded in rallying support for the Tome of Leo, having the empire officially recognize and endorse the deposition of Pope Dioscorus, holding the Egyptian bishops at the imperial city until a new bishop for Alexandria was appointed, and handing over the monks that supported Eutychus to the Patriarch of Constantinople. While the bishops had unanimously rejected the idea of writing a creed at the second session, at the start of the fifth session the small group assigned to do so by the imperial commissioners read aloud their work. We do not have a copy of this first definition, but we do know some information about its contents. For example, it lacked any mention of the phrase Theotokos. We know this because it angered the bishops, and they demanded that if a creed is to be accepted, it must include the phrase. One of the bishops stood up and began screaming anathemas against the Nestorians and refused to sign any document that did not refer to the Virgin as the Theotokos. We also know that the first draft of the creed used the Alexandrian Christological formula from or of two natures, and not the in two natures formula of Pope Leo. During the discussion, one of the commissioners objected to the Alexandrian Christological formula of the first draft of the creed. He explained that Pope Dioscorus had claimed one nature of the Word incarnate, and had excommunicated Bishop Flavian for saying that Christ was in two natures after the incarnation. Since the council had condemned Dioscorus and Eutychus, then the definition should defend against their heresy and employ Flavian and Leo's formula stating Christ in two natures. Bishop Anatolius of Constantinople objected. He explained that Pope Dioscorus was not a heretic, but was deposed for refusing the three summons, and that the Alexandrian formula should not be changed. The commissioner then asked the council if they had truly agreed with the Tome of Leo. When they affirmed their agreement with it, the commissioners replied that if they agree with it, then they should rewrite the definition to include Pope Leo's formula. The council protested, explaining that there was no need for a new definition, and even Eusebius of Dorylaeum, who had been an ally of both Flavian and Leo, objected. This interaction demonstrates that while the Eastern bishops had accepted the Tome of Leo and its formula, they did not recognize it as the standard. They still favored the Alexandrian formula and hoped to include it in the creed. As we discussed earlier, the original goal of the Romans was to simply have the Tome of Leo rubber-stamped as the statement of faith at this council. But things weren't going their way. The commissioners had ordered an actual creed to be written, and now this creed contained the Alexandrian formula. The Romans objected to the creed and threatened that if it was not reworked to better fit Leo's tome, they would leave the council and conduct a new one in Rome. One of the bishops said that the full creed should be read out and that anyone who dissents should leave, because the bishops had all agreed with this creed. The majority of bishops supported this opinion. The Illyrian bishops who supported Pope Dioscorus then began crying out, "Those who disagree with this creed are Nestorians, and that the Nestorians should go back to Rome." One of the commissioners then interjected, saying that the deposed Dioscorus supports the formula from two natures, but that Pope Leo supports the formula that there are two natures in Christ, united without confusion, change, or separation, in the one only begotten Son, our Savior. He then asked the bishops, "Whom do you follow, the saintly Leo or Dioscorus?" This question took everyone off guard. The way the commissioner had phrased his question made it seem like Pope Dioscorus had preached confusion and mixing, and that Leo's formula was the only orthodox option. We know, however, that this is untrue based on Pope Dioscorus' confession in the first session, where he clarified that the Alexandrians deny any confusion, mixing, or alteration. Defeated and unsure of what would happen to them if they continued to support the Alexandrian formula, the bishops explained that they support Pope Leo and not Pope Dioscorus. The commissioners then told them that if they support Pope Leo, then they should include his formula in their creed. The committee was then instructed to rework the Chalcedonian Creed to include the phrase, "in two natures." Their final product was ratified and accepted as the statement of faith of the Council of Chalcedon. There was no discussion of the consequences of using the phrase, "in two natures." The Eastern critics of the Council saw in it a betrayal of the already established norm of the faith and a veiled return of Nestorianism. The supporters of the Council tried to claim that the phrases "of" and "in two natures" mean the same idea. The majority of the Christians in the East would reject the Chalcedonian formula on the basis that it allowed for separation in the person of Christ.